The murders are the ultimate mystery. Where were they killed? By whom? And with what motive? Were they killed deliberately or by chance? Questions which, as of now, have no answers.
Nearly 40 years ago, the Colonial Parkway became a symbol of terror for a generation of Virginians.
8 young people, all may have died at the hand of the same killer.
It's Virginia's oldest and largest serial killing spree. The Colonial Parkway murders.
Oh my God, there's somebody that's targeting these kids.
A predator was hunting here.
The cases involved abandoned cars at notorious lovers' lanes.
Selecting targets at random.
The cars contained victims' clothing, wallets, and keys, with no signs of struggle.
And leaving no survivors.
It's horrible.
Now we're able to say, after all of those years, the perpetrator has finally been identified. Serial killers always have a pause between their events, but as time moves on, the hunger returns. Let me do this again, because God, it was good the first time. I spent my career closing murder cases, but I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable. To catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective. At about 5:30 in the evening, 2 park policemen respond to a 911 call reporting an accident on the Colonial Parkway. They are flagged down by an individual. They follow him a short distance to an embankment above the York River, which flows through the park. They see a 1980 white Honda sedan, nose first in the river. They immediately work their way down to see if there's someone trapped in this car. They find 2 women in the car with a ghost-like appearance, and their throats have been deeply slashed. This is not an accident. It's a homicide.
What you see in front of you is the actual Colonial Parkway.
My name is Danny Plott. During the Colonial Parkway murder investigations, I was a special agent with the Virginia State Police. Back when the 1986 murder occurred, the Colonial Parkway was similar, but it wasn't as well maintained. It's a beautiful scenic drive. But in the late 80s, when these murders occurred, it was a pretty dark and spooky place.
Plott is an old-time cop. Danny has suffered the slings and arrows, like me, of the press and the public and the 2-bit politicians and so on and so on. So it was a natural thing that he and I became friends. Hey, man.
Joe?
How are you?
Good. Yourself?
The same. I'm still walking around.
Me and you both.
Danny first called me because he liked my show.
I watched an episode of Homicide Hunter and Joe's show was wonderful. You know, he would say something and then there'd be the my. I was impressed.
And he let me know that and asked me what it was like to live in Colorado Springs, and I informed him I had moved.
And he said, I live in Suffolk, Virginia. No shit.
He asked if we could meet for lunch. I said yes.
Talking with Joe is an experience in itself. His ability with murders is amazing to me. I talked to him for hours about the Colonial Parkway murders.
Which I had vaguely heard about 2,200 miles away in Colorado. They meant nothing to me at the time because they were outside my jurisdiction. But now they interested me. Danny Plott mentioned that there's been an enormous amount of press coverage. There's been a book written about him, all kinds of things. And I did not disagree with his thought process on the entire case. He was certainly on the right track. For 37 years, the killer was unknown, and the Colonial Parkway murders was his torturous career case.
Solving the case became an infatuation. It became frustrating. Sometimes we felt like we were really close in finding who did these murders, and then something would knock them out of it. Every stone that you could think of was overturned, yet here we were. Nobody was in handcuffs. The Colonial Parkway is a rural, scenic road that connects three of the biggest historical places in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Yorktown all the way to Jamestown and the Williamsburg area.
And because it's a federal park, there are no structures, no businesses, no billboards, no marks of the 21st century. There are trees and bushes and vines. So if you're on this stretch at night, you're in a Stephen King novel for 23 miles.
The Parkway also has multiple overlooks. You can call it a lover's lane. If you wanted privacy, it was the perfect place. The murders started in October of 1986. The park rangers were aghast at what they saw.
The park police summoned the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the only jurisdiction within that park, because it is federal property.
The two girls, they were identified immediately because their identifications were in the car. Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. Their throats have been cut very badly. This was something brutal. What was very puzzling to the FBI, that blood was not in the car.
The amount of blood would have been substantial, and we've never found any bloody prints, any bloody clothing. Clearly, inside of that car is not the crime scene. Somewhere else they were killed and put into that car. Was it driven there? I don't know.
They examine the ground in this pull-off area, assuming they will find a second set of tire tracks. They find tire tracks that match the tires on the Honda, but they find no tire tracks of another vehicle.
What was really perplexing was the car was covered in diesel fuel. And there were matches around where it appeared that someone had tried to get the diesel fuel to light.
Diesel has a very high ignition point. You could light an entire book of matches and throw it into liquid diesel fuel, and all that would happen is the diesel fuel would put out the fire.
It was a failed attempt at trying to cover up their crime.
Now, what does that tell you? Whoever this is has diesel fuel. There's a lot of people that carry diesel fuel in and around in their vehicle. Truckers do, people that have a diesel car, or people with boats. Interesting.
This was not an easy case to solve. Why would somebody target two women? There's no money taken, and they're viciously, I mean viciously attacked.
Whoever is responsible for this crime is an organized offender. He has a plan. He somehow gets control of these people, and then he attacks and kills both and sends the car over the side of this embankment. You and I both know it's not difficult to push a car. You kick it out of gear, and one person can easily move a car.
Sure. But remember that it's sitting in an overlook. It's a paved overlook. Then you have a patch of grass, and there's a curb. Not a high curb, but there's a curb. So someone or some people were strong enough to push it, pop it over that. But with two passengers in it, always felt like it was somebody with some strength.
Likely a man. Could have a helper. So now you have a solid view of what this crime scene looks like, but you're not even really sure how it happened. You need an autopsy to tell you more. So the FBI agents head to the Virginia State Medical Examiner's office. The autopsy results show that the girls had been dead for a minimum of 24 hours.
Rebecca's throat was cut, and it was cut viciously. But Kathleen was almost decapitated. There's a brutality in that. I think that says that somebody was really angry for whatever reason.
There was no evidence of sexual assault on either victim, but they found something else. The autopsy revealed that both girls suffered ligature strangulation. A ligature is any device used to put pressure on the neck to restrict the windpipe to die from asphyxia.
And in Kathleen's hair, there was a small piece of rope.
The autopsy further decides that the throat slashing was accomplished post-mortem and had nothing to do with their death. They were dead when their throats were cut. They were essentially killed twice. Who the hell are we dealing with here?
Rebecca and Kathleen were last seen Thursday night. A Honda Civic was found off the Colonial Parkway. It had been rolled into these bushes, almost into the water. The women were found with their throats slit.
The FBI agents go and notify the two victims' families of their untimely demise and say, "Tell me about your daughter."
My name's Bill Thomas. I'm the older brother of Kathy Thomas. She was fun and smart and a great friend, and her attitude was just so positive that people were drawn to her.
She graduated in the second class from the U.S. Naval Academy that had women.
She ended up first serving on this ship, a submarine tender called the USS L.Y. Spear. Now, it's during this time, though, she's also investigated for being a lesbian.
In the 1980s, the Navy remained archaic with draconian rules. Homosexuality was not acceptable in any form, particularly so in a female.
This was not going to be a place that she could live her life as a lesbian in an open fashion.
And she resigned her commission.
Even though she had left the Navy with great reluctance, Kathy was actually turning a corner into a really happy, less pressured version of her life. She was dating this wonderful woman, Rebecca Dowski.
Rebecca Dowski came from Poughkeepsie, New York. She originally attended Dickinson College and had transferred to the College of William and Mary in Virginia. She's a very bright student, and she really fit in well there.
She was in her senior year, sweet, smart, extremely athletic. She was on a championship women's softball team. So both Kathy and Becky had this I can accomplish anything attitude.
Kathy and her girlfriend were not accepted by society at large. Privacy was very important to them. What better place than the Colonial Parkway at night?
The FBI investigators focused on Kathy being in a lesbian relationship with Becky. Now, what really makes that come into play is she had been dating someone else.
There were all of these rumors that one of Rebecca's ex-lovers had gotten angry and, retaliated against the both of them.
He was Muslim. The Muslim religion does not always look at gay or lesbian relationships kindly.
Ex-boyfriend Sharif Ali realizes that Becky has left him for another woman. He is furious. He has very strong feelings about homosexual behavior, and now he's been passed over for a member of the same sex by his girlfriend. It makes him an astounding suspect. So they bring Ali Sharif in for questioning. And he admits that he has been embarrassed by her departure for another female, but he would never do her harm. He also has an alibi. He was in Washington, D.C. for the weekend, 200 miles away during the time of the killings. He may have had a motive, but he physically couldn't have done it. Over the next few weeks, the investigation slows, but the notoriety of the case really starts to move.
The two friends were last seen together in Dowski's dorm room at 7 p.m. Police sources think Dowski and Thomas then drove here to the Colonial Parkway.
I remember the ratings were extremely high. People were watching. They were talking about the romantic relationship between the two. One of the motives for a killer is someone that is opposed to this type of lifestyle.
Friends say driving along the Colonial Parkway was a Thursday night routine for Dowski and Thomas. But what happened October 9th wasn't routine. It was murder.
I don't think we understood the full gravity of what happened out there in October of '86 until September of '87. Then I think it took on a different life of its own.
Olive White Sheriff's Deputy is out patrolling the Ragged Island Wildlife Management Area. There is a black pickup truck. The door is open, and no one is around.
Something was going on. The truck was running, the radio was on, and there were shoes and articles of clothing in the truck.
He calls for assistance. They go through the truck and they notice a wallet on top of the dashboard that contains a driver's license.
It was a gentleman named David Noblin. David Noblin was 19 years old. He was a resident of Newport News.
His mother has already reported him missing because he didn't return home after an evening out.
The last time he was seen was in the company of a young lady named Robin Edwards. Robin was also a Newport News resident, and she was 14 years old and was also missing.
Now everyone is alarmed. So where are the occupants of this vehicle, and what has happened to them?
Ragged Island is a creepy place to go. It's very secluded.
This parking lot was used as a lover's lane type area. It sounds a lot like the Colonial Parkway.
They had a feeling this wasn't going to end well, and they were right.
Year-old David Knobling and 14-year-old Robin Edwards were last seen Saturday night. His truck was found with the keys in the ignition, door open, and radio on near the James River Bridge.
The Isle of Wight Sheriff's Department launches a massive search. It's very difficult to search. There are vines and weeds and brush of all sorts. They could be almost anywhere.
Personnel from multiple agencies, a helicopter, search dogs.
This search goes on for days.
And unfortunately, on the third day, they found something.
My dad was out there at Ragged Island, chest waders, walking that whole area, looking for him.
Carl Knobling, God bless him. There were people that were telling Carl Knobling not to go down the beach. He said, you aren't going to stop me. I'm going down there.
David Knobling's father, Carl Knobling, found the bodies. I can only imagine what that's like, because they were not in very good shape.
Oh, he was brokenhearted. Brokenhearted, and we were out there with him. It was so devastating. Carl Knobling was a broken man.
Yeah, my dad didn't even have a chance to call us and give us a heads up. My mom and I, we found out on the news. I remember hearing my mom scream. My God. It was horrible.
The bodies were found further down on the riverbank itself. The James River there is brackish or brine. It's not fresh water, it's not salt water. It's a combination. And that did not do good things to human bodies.
Both bodies are bloated from decomposition, having been out for 3 or 4 days.
Robin Edwards had one gunshot wound, execution style, to the back of her head. David had 2 gunshot wounds. A gunshot wound to the left shoulder and 1 shot to the back of the head. I think Robin was shot first. And I think David knew he had 1 chance. We speculate he tried to climb a sandy clay bank, and he was within almost grabbing distance of a tree line. That's where he was shot once in the shoulder. That incapacitated him enough to where he was then shot in the back of the head and killed.
I totally disagree with that. He would definitely not run from a fight. Even if the guy had a gun, he wouldn't run from it.
So why are these bodies such a long walk from where the truck was located? Why would they go such a far distance from this vehicle?
When you leave that parking lot and you want to go down here, you have to walk down this boardwalk because all this is marshland, like swamp.
Mm-hmm.
So to get down to here, good little walk. But you don't walk down a wooden, older boardwalk barefoot.
Not willingly.
No, not willingly. So how did they end up down there?
Two possibilities, in my opinion. They're running from somebody, barefoot because they don't have time to put their shoes on, or they're marched down there by the perpetrator. So who would want to murder these two people in cold blood? Investigators go to the families to see if they can determine suspects.
This is the way I see my brother, like this one. Just him laid back, cutting up, having fun, smiling, you know? I definitely looked up to David. He tried toughening me up, and he did it with kicking my butt a lot. He was a great brother. I met Robin through my cousin Jason. We went to the same school together. She was always a real cool person.
We had sort of prepared ourselves for them to find her either hurt, possibly drowned. We were not prepared to find her murdered.
Robin was the youngest of the Colonial Parkway murder victims. She was 14. She had been through a lot in life. She was the kind of girl that often ran away. She got into trouble.
She could be very, very sweet, and she could be the most aggravating and irritating child in the world. She was very independent.
But Robin was also at a turning point in her life. She was finally starting to apply herself to her classes. She was starting to turn things around.
The big questions unanswered are, why was David with Robin at the wildlife preserve? And what happened after they got there?
That day, I followed him out, bummed a cigarette from him, and we talked in the driveway for 15, 20 minutes, I guess, and then he left. I carried that through my life, that I was able to say bye to him. I don't know why. It just seems so small now, but at the time it was big.
So they learned that David and Robin were hanging out at an arcade in the area with their friends, and David agreed to take Robin home. They are not a couple, according to the family, but what does the killer see? A man and a woman. And what would he assume from that? They are lovers in Lover's Lane, as were the first two women. Much of this is very familiar.
The murders are the ultimate mystery. Where were they killed? By whom? And with what motive? Were they killed deliberately or by chance? Questions which, as of now, have no answers.
That drove those of us that worked on the task force that we need to find this person because they're just heartless and brutal. When David and Robin were autopsied, the investigation revealed that Robin had been sodomized and there was still semen in her cavity. The medical examiner said this sample is very degraded because you had bodies laying in the water for 3 days.
This is 1987. DNA is in its infancy.
DNA databases were either non-existent or just starting, but the sample was preserved.
So now what? There's a possibility the motive is sexual assault of the female victim, but it's only a possibility. But why kill them? There's no answer for that. Despite the differences, the similarities are just too great. Proximity, darkness, area, type. People don't get killed in parked cars very often. The odds are great. This is the same person or persons responsible for both. You've got a hunter, somebody who's busy. A year later, the appetite returns.
They haven't been arrested. They probably haven't even been talked to.
No, they haven't been found. So now they become convinced that maybe they're pretty clever. Let me do this again, because God, it was good the first time.
But I'm not going to do it where I did it before.
No, but still in the general vicinity. They kill where it's convenient.
Places they know.
And I would be very worried that the bodies were going to start to pile up here. 4 dead, and there's going to be more dead if that theory is correct. He's going to do it again. He will continue unless he is stopped. These murders came to be known as the Colonial Parkway murders.
Police sources claim that 2 cases are so alike, the same persons may be responsible.
This story really picked up from the very beginning. It was very much an East Coast highlighted story because double murders were incredibly rare.
These young couples are violently dead in an otherwise picturesque place. How could this be?
Everyone was talking about whether this is the work of a serial killer.
Once the police realized, oh my God, we're dealing with connected crimes or potentially connected crimes, police presence on the Parkway increased dramatically.
And that was the first time we heard about the possibility of a serial killer or a pattern emerging. And I felt the investigation begin to shift.
It turned this area upside down. I mean, people were scared to go up and down the parkways, and my mom was scared to death when I went out, scared to death.
Everyone is very busy now looking for people who seem to be out of the area, seem to be doing something that doesn't look right.
After the murders, people realized they may be going to the Colonial Parkway at their own risk, but it didn't stop them. Sure, the last thing they thought of is that they would get approached or grabbed on the Colonial Parkway. It scared a lot of people, but unfortunately it didn't scare them all.
The families held a vigil, a memorial to remind us all the killer is still out there.
The pressure exerted by the press and by the public results in the formation of a Colonial Parkway Murders Task Force, where agencies come together. More heads are better than one. Danny Plott was a trained and experienced homicide agent. Plott became in command.
We were given a conference room and told to have at it.
The common theory at the time is that the perpetrator is driving around the Colonial Parkway area looking for victims parked in a car alone in the dark in a lover's lane kind of area.
One thing we tried, we took a male agent and a female agent, and we put them in cars, different nights, different times, and waited to be approached. I worked some surveillance. I had a beard. I had actual hair. I was lucky enough to know who I was with, but you run out of things to talk about after a couple hours. Surveillance is cool in the movies. It is far from it in real life. We were approached. But all we did was, I think, scare the living daylights out of somebody that just was hoping they could see naked flesh. Somebody that just kind of hung around and tried to look in. Nobody wished any more for an arrest than those of us that were on that task force.
Your killer is a shadow in the night. You're pedaling a bike that is stationary, and no matter how hard you pedal, it goes nowhere.
The task force established tip lines.
And you get hit with tons of tips that are just crazy.
Many people will call in and report the little green men from Mars are responsible for this. But every once in a while, somebody says something that sounds reasonable, and you pay attention to that.
There was a man named Sammy Ryder that said he saw Robin and David maybe here's a lead we can work with.
Sam Reeder was at Ragged Island and remembers seeing David's truck.
I just took one quick look around. I flashed my headlights back in the brush, but I couldn't see anything.
He paints himself as an eyewitness. They bring Sammy Reeder in, they talk to him. So Mr. Reeder says that he stops at Ragged Island on his way home from a date. He notices this truck.
He said that he saw Robin and David get out of the car.
He admires the truck, said it's very nice, very clean.
The truck was running, the radio was on.
So he says all these things, none of which is earth-shattering because it's what the press reported.
Another statement was, I heard 2 shots. They had to be coming from the marshland way in the back. I decided it was time to leave and I left. There are several things wrong with Ryder's statement.
There were actually 3 shots fired that night. 2 were fired at David Knobling and 1 at Robin.
Sammy didn't mention anything about them being barefoot, but their shoes are in the car.
The sand down there is not smooth sand. It is made up with a lot of jagged shells, etc.
It is extremely unlikely, not wearing shoes or socks, that they would walk this far in rough terrain on their own accord.
Somebody marched them down to the place where they died. They did not get out of the car and go strolling down there.
He is inserting himself in a serial killer investigation. Now, why would he do that?
When Mr. Ryder was pressed, he finally admitted, well, I took money out of David Knobling's wallet. I don't know if he figured if he came up with this tip and they found his print somewhere on the truck, he would be able to say, well, I was just looking in. Well, I think he did it out of trying to cover his ass.
What he saw was a wallet, and he took advantage of it. Oh, Sammy, why are you wasting our time with this? He didn't kill 2 people. He didn't know who did.
Law enforcement were very frustrated with the investigation. They weren't solving the case. People were fearful.
I've noticed that a lot of girls aren't walking on campus by themselves, especially late at night.
Obviously, we have to consider that there's a dangerous person or persons still in the community.
We needed this task force to try to, if not tie these murders together, find common denominators or separate them.
Plott is experienced and he's smart. He sees the rivers. And he said, hey, look at this map. What is around all of these crime scenes? Water. How do you move in water? You move in water in a boat.
The thing I remember about the autopsies of Kathleen and Rebecca was this rope that was found. It was a piece of nautical rope, which to me, nautical rope is either used on a boat or used to tie up a boat.
Now that is an interesting fact. What if our man is a boater? Maybe we've been thinking about this wrong the entire time. How did he approach these people?
If he used the boat in some way, I think he had to anchor the boat on the river and use a smaller boat to come to the bank.
If you got a trolling motor, it makes little or no sound. So you can maneuver around in this water and nobody even knows you're there. You have no obligation legally to put lights on your boat. You're not at sea. You're in inland waterways. No one's going to question you. You're a waterman.
Right.
The word waterman is very specific to this area. It's people who are involved in the oyster business and the fishing business in the York River, the James River, and the Rappahannock River. They have their own dialect. They have their own language generationally, all the way back to the colonial period.
This could be a waterman. That's someone we need to concentrate on.
So what else do we know? The toys used in these crimes are the toys that watermen use as tools. Most of these boats have diesel motors.
Diesel was used in Rebecca and Kathleen's murder. Whoever killed them brought diesel fuel with them to the scene.
We have an extremely sharp instrument that cuts their throats. Fishermen take care of their knives.
Part of their living.
Part of their living, sharp as a razor. You can fillet a fish in a heartbeat. This all became known as the waterman theory. Danny Plott and other cops he brought with him survey the fishermen in the area. These are an unusual lot. They operate in private, they're loners.
They are tough as oak. They did not take kindly to being, even interviewed.
They picked a lifestyle that they don't want to interact with people. And for straight-laced FBI guys to walk into a waterman bar and say, hey, we want to ask some questions, they're not going to get any progress from that.
At this point, it's an all-hands-on-deck sort of investigation. But as it turns out, shortly they will discover even that is not enough. The park police have informed Danny Plott they have found yet another abandoned vehicle on the Colonial Parkway. The keys are in the ignition, the car is running, and nobody's around, and Plott's heart is in his throat.
They're going, oh shit, here we go again.
The Colonial Parkway serial killer is back in business. Danny Plott is very concerned. Where are the people from this car?
This has a lot of similarities to the other murders.
Lovers lanes, near water, only 1 mile from the Thomas Dowski crime scene. 1 mile? Are you kidding me?
The park rangers informed Plott that they ran a registration check on the vehicle and determined it's owned by Keith Call. They contact Call's parents. They report him missing that morning. The parents say he was with a female named Cassandra Haley. And Cassandra Haley's parents also report her missing. Where are they?
Some of their clothes and the car keys found inside the car.
A Navy security team looks through the woods. Park rangers use a bloodhound and a boat for air scent over the water. Other dogs comb the beachfront area.
A dog traced the couple's scent to the water's edge.
And then the scent ends.
The dogs are telling them those bodies are in this water. But they're not there now because water moves and it moves bodies with it.
I searched the parkway in a company of United States Marines who walked an arm's length away from each other across a whole area near where that car was found.
The search dogs take the scent and they march directly to the York River.
And that night, the nor'easter had been passing through.
Right. High waves.
High current.
60, 70 mile an hour winds and driving rain. So they are disposed of, killed by some method or means. They go in the York River, the nor'easter comes and sweeps them where? Out to sea. Maybe all the way out.
Wouldn't take much.
And these two poor, unfortunate young people are never found.
Not a trace of them. The families couldn't even have a funeral.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
I didn't want to think the worst to start with. All of a sudden, there's all these police calling the house, and then as the day went on, you just kind of came into that reality that something had happened. Keith just vanished into thin air.
Keith was really just a good-hearted kid, and you just don't ever think that when somebody walks out of the door, it's going to be the last time you see him.
He was into computers, We had some of the first. He was in there banging away on his Commodore 64 and learning everything about that, and he was just like that 80s guy.
In 1988, when this happened, he was in his first semester of college. And then with Cassandra, they were friends, and she was really a pretty girl.
Cassandra was the it girl. She was a cheerleader. She's got a magnetism about her. She was very bright. She was really looking forward to completing her education and going on with a career.
They went out that night to a movie, and then they decided to stop by some kind of college party going on there.
Friends confirm Keith and Sandra partied at the University Square Apartments April 10th. They left around 2 a.m., then disappeared.
And then Cassandra had to be home at a certain time. They said their goodbyes, and that's the last time anybody saw them.
The Parkway was not a place that you went like that and just left your car there. Keith was more responsible than that. The other murders had already happened. Keith wouldn't have went there.
It always haunted me, and it haunts me to this day, that we did not find Keith and Cassandra's remains. We have to find the murdering son of a bitch that did this.
They finally decide, all right, let's go back and start over.
About 6 months into the FBI task force of the Colonial Parkway murders, we had come to a couple conclusions. Looking at all the scenes, the vehicles, the wallets out, we decided who we were looking for was a person of authority.
So imagine now it's nighttime here. You're with somebody you care about. You're not really thinking about anything. And then suddenly, there's a knock on your window, and a man with a flashlight says, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here."
What if this killer poses as a policeman? In the process of somebody getting out their ID, he pulls a gun, so he now has control. Could that be? Of course it could.
During this era, you could buy an old cop car complete with a side light, etc., for $300 at a police auction and duplicate being a cop.
We decided to hold a press conference with the FBI's blessing, and it exploded.
It reached the point where, even in the newspaper articles, they were warning people to verify that if they were being pulled over, that it was really a policeman.
The media took it and ran with it because it made a good story.
Nothing about this seems to work, and then you begin to convince yourself that nothing will ever work. Law enforcement are running out of room at the morgue. This is one serious guy. He's not gonna stop. As cases go on for years, they become more difficult. Colonial Parkway murders have slowed down. Nothing much has been happening. No news, no new events. An anonymous tipster calls the task force and says an individual has been harassing couples in the Lover's Lane pull-offs on the Colonial Parkway.
They called him a peeping Tom.
Really? Now that is interesting. Who might you be, Mr. Peeping Tom? And what are you doing on the Parkway?
Through a FBI or state police tip line, we get a tip that a man in a blue truck is stopping and looking in parked cars on the parkway. They get a tag. The tag reads EMRAW, eat 'em raw. What do you eat raw? Oysters. That truck comes back to a waterman named Alan Wilmer. So now the FBI has somebody that they can look at.
This could be him. This could be the Colonial Parkway killer, and they need to act fast.
The FBI and the Virginia State Police now have what appears to be a viable suspect. The FBI surveils him, goes to his residence, where they find him cleaning his truck.
They noticed Wilmer was out spray painting the back of his vehicle and that he was bleaching the interior of the vehicle.
Now, why would he do that? Is he concealing evidence?
Maybe this is our guy. They immediately go to get a search warrant.
The FBI return to Wilmer's place. They present him with the warrant. He is cooperative. He steps aside and they search the premise.
They do the search warrant of his truck. Doesn't reveal a whole lot, but the search of his house reveals several things.
They find an enormous supply of pornography. They find guns. They find pairs of handcuffs and other bondage devices.
I am not saying that makes you someone that kills people, but you put everything together. This is not your average guy.
They continue to talk to him. He denies any knowledge of any of this, denies everything. They have no evidence that could result in an arrest. They decide that they will have an FBI polygraphist take a shot at this guy.
Mr. Wilmer was interviewed, and he did admit to being on the parkway and approaching a vehicle or two.
Which was very useful information, but his story changed a little bit.
He said, yeah, I was on a Colonial Parkway, but I wasn't in that particular pull-off. I was in another one. I walk around out there and I look for places to fish. Nothing wrong with that. And there isn't anything wrong with that. So he takes the polygraph. And the polygraphist says he didn't do this. He's innocent. And the FBI looks at that polygraphist and says, well, you better be right.
The FBI decided that him passing a polygraph and the lack of direct physical evidence was enough to say he's not the one.
He looks good, nothing happens. He moves on, and so does the task force.
FBI and state police, if one of us got a lead, you know, we'd let the other one know. But the leads, they just weren't there. And, you know, a family member, they weren't shy, and I don't blame them. And they sometimes weren't shy in the media. You know, my son and daughter, sister, brother, brutally murdered. What are you doing?
You didn't hear nothing about it. The FBI didn't talk to anybody. And then Joyce would consistently pick up the phone and call them up and ask them about the case and all that.
It seemed like they weren't giving us a lot of information. It just kind of went dead, and I didn't handle it very good at all. I mean, even to this day, that is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's just like somebody walks out the door and they're fine, and they just don't come back, and you don't have answers. You don't have a body.
The anxiety was terrible at that time. I mean, it's just not knowing what happened to him, just nothing but anxiety. It just doesn't go away, you know?
You have to become your own advocate because no one else will do it for you. We're the ones now kind of trying to advance this case. I'm looking for answers. Who killed my younger sister and her girlfriend? All of these other families, mine included, deserve answers.
All our answer was, we're doing everything we can. It had been years, nothing.
Labor Day weekend 1989, and a Virginia state trooper is investigating an abandoned vehicle in a rest area that's left running with the keys in the ignition.
And when he ran the tag, of course, it ding, 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 ding. This is a car of a missing person.
The car comes back to 21-year-old Daniel Lauer, reported missing with 18-year-old Anna Maria Phelps. The Colonial Parkway killer is back. And maybe this time he's left the waterfront. The investigators are instantly suspicious that this is the Colonial Parkway killer. But what's different?
Along I-64, their car was found at a westbound rest stop.
They call it the New Kent Rest Area.
This rest area is many miles from the Colonial Parkway. This is inland, not the waterfront where he has been for years.
So I went up there and I find the car, a gold Chevy Nova with black primer.
He sees this car, clothes in the back seat, keys in the ignition, car running. It is no question, it is deja vu. We're dealing with the same guy.
Anna Maria Phelps was a 18-year-old young lady from Amelia County, Virginia, who had recently dropped out of school.
School wasn't for her. She wanted to work. She wanted to get ahead in life. She wanted to be on her own. And she had a boyfriend named Clinton Lauer.
The other victim, Daniel Lauer, was her boyfriend's brother.
Daniel, he was a horse lover. He liked riding. He was 6 foot tall. He was a dominating force. And anybody that handles horses, he wasn't a weakling either. Daniel was doing very well. His father had a painting business and he worked there. His father had gotten him a Chevy Nova. In many respects, he was on the right path for independence himself. And Daniel had decided he wanted to kind of get out on his own. And the plan was for Anna Maria Phelps and Daniel Lauer to drive to Virginia Beach. And the best way to get there was on I-64.
We learned from the families that they never arrived in Virginia Beach.
If they are in fact missing and they're not in this car, then where are they? Could the Colonial Parkway killer have abducted and killed them just like the others?
Where are these people? What has happened to them?
And the search begins.
There was a search by special agents of the Virginia State Police and troopers of the Virginia State Police in the general area. No Anna Maria and Daniel. Again, it's very frustrating. And I can only imagine what it's like for the families.
We really love both of them very much. And if there's anything at all that you can do to help, we'd appreciate it.
6 weeks later, on October 21st, 1989, 2 turkey hunters find something shocking.
I get a call, hey, we need you to go near the New Kent Rest Area. I'm there. There was a logging road. That was the best way to describe it. And there was a deputy station there. And I stopped and he said, go up here. You didn't walk very far up the fork of the road. And then you went into the woods. I could see they already had a tent set up.
They find skeletonized remains of humans. 2 skulls and bones.
These are 2 young people that, unfortunately, best way to describe it nicely is they melted into the ground.
They were so badly decomposed at the time that it was very difficult to determine exactly what happened.
That's me with a shovel in my hand. I would have been 33, maybe. I believe it had rained slightly, as you can tell. One man's wearing a raincoat. The bottom photo is Anna Maria's locket. That was found at the fork of the road. We speculate that maybe was where she was killed, and that locket came off. When the general area was searched, there was, very little to find. No bullets, no knife, no anything.
An autopsy confirmed the body of Anna Marie Phelps. Another body is believed to be Dan Lauer.
The skeletal remains were taken to the Smithsonian Institute with the forensic anthropologist, Dr. Doug Owsley.
Autopsies of skeletons yield little other than sex and age, and any wounds to the bone structure.
When he examined the skeletal remains, Dr. Owsley found what he deemed a knife wound on Anna Maria's left hand. And he speculated that if someone is getting ready to cut your throat, you hold your hands up, and it was a diagonal knife wound on her third finger. That's the only trauma that he could save.
Is this the Colonial Parkway killer? Well, of course it is. There's a change here and there in the MO, but so what? Either way, they work.
The couple's disappearance is strikingly similar to others, including Robin Edwards and David Knobling.
The only difference is that they were found in the woods instead of in the river.
The victims are in cars. There's 2 of them. They're probably very vulnerable.
He strangles, cuts the throat of Rebecca and Kathleen. He shoots David and Robin. He disposes of the bodies, however it was done, of Keith and Cassandra, and then lays the other 2 side by side.
There are a couple things that are different, but there are some things that are not.
2 on the parkway, 2 within easy driving distance of the parkway.
His method up to now has been the sea and the water. Now his method is a concealment in the deep woods. What does that mean? Did he become fearful of the increased patrol activity on the parkway? Probably. He doesn't want to stop killing. He just wants to stop the police from getting close to him. And the reality is he may never be found. This individual has eluded law enforcement for years. If he's shifting his MO and he's committing other murders, we may not even recognize them as his. He's a killer. That's what he does. The question always becomes, has he done other crimes? Of course he has.
That's what's kind of scary.
There's going to be other victims. How many did he kill? We have no clue. There have been 8 dead. There's a possibility there are others dead that we don't even know about. And the case continues to be cold, despite their focus on it for years. They've gotten nowhere fast.
After the task force, I worked several years in the fugitive unit as a special agent, which took me away from it, and it was given to somebody else. But I worked in and around the same office, and I did not have the least bit problem saying, hey, anything new with Ragged Island? Anything new with the Parkway murders? No, go away.
Despite all the effort, despite all the leads and all of the investigative work, the years begin to tick by, and no justice has been found for the families.
My mom and my dad kept in touch with the police over the years, and I took it with a grain of salt. I had zero expectation about finding out who killed my brother after the 10th year, the 20th year, the 30th year.
And it's been a horrendous waiting game the whole time. Just a cold waiting game. It's all it's been.
It's not like it was forgotten, but it's just like, what do you do? None of us were brought up in law enforcement. None of us had any background on what to do if your brother is abducted or murdered.
You've got 8 victims, 16 moms and dads. We've lost 9 of them so far. Both of my parents passed away. It's been 37 years. I can't really say it gets easier to talk about.
All of these victims have been dead much longer than they were alive.
Many of the investigators involved in this are retired, but this is not a case anybody ever forgets. It's been very hard on Danny.
I retired from the state police in 2013. But those murders have never been far from my mind, and I still remember the frustration of why can't we find this person?
It's the worst feeling in the world. You feel like a failure. You feel like you haven't done your job. You know better. You did everything humanly possible. It just wasn't enough. And you beat yourself up for that. December 2017, law enforcement responds to a 911 complaint about a foul odor emanating from a private residence. They find a badly decomposed body that basically is a bed full of soup.
The decay was horrible. They don't know if they're dealing with a natural death, a suicide, or a murder.
The autopsy reveals advanced arterial sclerosis and blocked arteries. In other words, his heart got blocked up and it stopped, and so did he. They take samples of these remains for the purpose of obtaining DNA and the possibility of using it to identify the individual. Little did anyone know this was someone who was directly under their noses the entire time.
January of 2024 was when we got the first substantial break in the Colonial Parkway murders.
A detective is going through the daily crime sheets, notices this death case, looks at the name, and recognizes it. It was from years ago.
I was called, and the person said, "The name Alan Wilmer mean anything to you?" And I said, "Yeah, Parkway murder suspect."
This was the guy that was identified by an anonymous person as a peeping Tom on the Colonial Parkway. The FBI looked at him and they let him go because they couldn't prove anything.
Suddenly, there's a connection back to the Colonial Parkway, which means a connection potentially to all the Colonial Parkway murders, which means you start looking for where do we have DNA that we might be able to compare. Robin Edwards had been sodomized, and to the credit of the Virginia State Police, they managed to maintain some of the samples of that DNA for ages.
Alan is deceased, but now we have a DNA sample from him, and they compare that sample taken from the victim to the sample taken of Alan Wilmer Sr., and it's a 100% match. Well, my. After decades of work and effort and theorizing, they finally have a name. All these years later, Alan Wilmer Sr. is the Colonial Parkway killer.
Best way to put what I was ecstatic. You know, I was ecstatic. I was also humbled and a little bit irritated at myself that I knew that Alan Wilmer was a great suspect.
But who is this guy? Who is Alan Wilmer Sr.?
What was Alan Wilmer besides a murdering piece of shit? He was a waterman.
He was a commercial fisherman, specifically, who farmed clams and oysters. He spent the majority of his time on his boat, a vessel he named Denny Wade.
From a geographic perspective, the anchor point is the York River, and that's where he worked every day. It makes complete sense that it was a waterman all along.
Also, Wilmer was an avid hunter. He belonged to a hunt club not far from the area where the fourth murder victims were discovered skeletonized.
When you look at Phelps Lauer, their bodies were found on a private hunting reserve. Is there a connection? We don't know. But where there's smoke, there's often fire.
Everything about Alan Wilmer's life fits the entire style of the Colonial Parkway killer. He moves by boat. He's around at night, where you can see the lovers' lanes from the water. Everything about him seems to come together once he's identified and firmly linked scientifically to one victim.
The FBI had called us, and they let us know that they had a DNA match. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked.
I got a call from our case agent, and they were bringing up Alan Wade Wilmer. It was just like, oh my God, oh my God.
Our family went through so much freaking heartache and pain wondering what the happened to my brother, you know, and come to find out they had the right guy the whole freaking time.
When you talk about anger, there has been like 35 years worth of anger. It's maddening. There he was in the very beginning.
I'm still angry about it to this day. I thought it was outrageous. They told my family they were looking at watermen. This is that guy. Is he responsible for Kathy and Becky's murder as well?
It always makes me wonder, could law enforcement have prevented the things that followed? The deaths, the loss of life.
The FBI decided that him passing a polygraph was enough to say he's not the one. The decision was made, and that wasn't made by me. I can't say we let him go, but we didn't do enough. I would have done anything, threatened him, anything else to try to get him to admit to it, but I don't think he was the kind of person that would.
He passed a polygraph, but so what? He also happens to be a sociopath, so he doesn't react. Thus, a polygraph is useless. He's not capable of emotion.
Someone like Wilmer, I killed 2 people today. Big deal.
That's what makes him so dangerous. Why is there only a DNA hit on one case when there are 4 double murders that everyone says are connected? One possible answer is no evidence contained any perpetrator DNA.
Robin and David's murder, that is the only one of the 4 that there was actual known DNA evidence.
So, what is known about the 4 Colonial Parkway double homicides?
At the very beginning, the FBI behavioral profilers said watermen.
The first 3, 86, 87, 88, all of them took place right against the water, either the York River or the James River.
You're dealing with a creature from the Black Lagoon. It's possible that in the first murder, he spots Kathy and Rebecca. in Lover's Lane, together in a car, approaches them. He strangles them and he slashes their throats. He put them in Kathy's Honda, soaked it in diesel fuel, tried to burn it. Then he shoved it over the embankment, assuming it would sink in the river and disappear. His attempt at disposal is a disaster. In the second killing, David Knobling and Robin Edwards, he sodomizes Robin Edwards, and he shoots her in the back of the head. David is shot in the shoulder and the back of the head. They're thrown in the river, assuming they'll float away, but they wind up trapped under the embankment. Another failure. However, DNA this time remains behind, which ultimately becomes his undoing.
By Keith and Cassandra's murder, he had perfected his craft.
If this was his third murder, he abducted and killed them, threw them in the water.
He went out and he fished, clammed, oystered from that boat. How hard would it have been to take them out on that boat and dispose of their bodies? It would have been very easy.
The fourth murder, Daniel Lauer and Anna Maria Phelps. They are discovered miles away from the parkway.
My best speculation is they stopped at the eastbound rest area of New Kent. That's where Wilmer took control of them. And then they were carried to these two positions where they were found.
It seems he learns from his mistakes. He gets better at disposing of remains. But what is his deal about couples? Does he hate them? What motive could there be? Maybe just a willingness to kill. And perhaps that's the only motive he needs.
Now, we learned that Wilmer's sphere was even larger. We now have some evidence that we can weigh against these other cases.
Here we have Alan Wilmer. We have him tied to the murder of Robin and David. Luckily, we got DNA from that.
But that wasn't the only crime his DNA hit on.
He was tied to another murder of a lady in Hampton.
There was a 29-year-old woman named Teresa Howell who left the nightclub and disappeared. She was found naked, strangled, and raped. And the perpetrator DNA was none other than Ellen Wilmer Sr.
We now know that he killed people that were alone, so the net gets cast pretty wide to look at cases that this guy may have been involved with.
Well, it's always difficult to say what will happen now. Will the DNA science advance further? Will they be able to determine something from some of these cases to link him directly to the crime? It's entirely possible. Prosecution will never occur. You can't prosecute a dead guy.
But I hope he's facing some kind of judgment.
Well, you would hope so. You would hope so. Perhaps he'd move to a higher court.
If we had had hindsight and law enforcement in general, FBI, state police, Isle of Wight County Sheriff's Office, this would have been handled different. But the only answers we can really for sure give is to Miss Howell's family, the Noblin family, and the Edwards family. The FBI and the Virginia State Police, they have not stopped. And I hope they can tie him to any and all of them. All these families deserve answers.
This completely destroyed my mother. In one night, she lost her only daughter, her youngest child, and her best friend. This is a solvable case. All it takes is time, attention, and resources.
It's not something that we ever wanted to be burying a younger brother. Keith was just starting out his life. He had aspirations. He was a good kid.
I hated that he didn't have the opportunity to grow up, and to have a family. I mean, that got robbed, Keith. He robbed him of a whole entire life.
That was my big brother, man, Doesn't get any tighter than that. I mean, it's not fair. I've missed so much with him. So much. I know my life would have been so much different if he was still in it. God, I wish he was still here.
Some people never have to pay the bill for what they've done in their life. They just crook, like everybody does.
I'll be quite frank with you. I hope there is a special, special place in hell for this man. And every day, what he did to those kids is done to him for eternity. Then maybe it'll be a little bit of justice.
There's supposed to be justice and punishment. Not always the case. Wilmer denied the hangman's noose. However, he died in his hovel of a trailer and turned into a puddle of DNA. No one cared about Alan. Maybe Alan didn't either. He cared about killing, and he got pretty good at it.
So what kind of things were these voices saying?
To kill somebody.
There are people in this world who are patently evil.
My mind went to that. Someone took her. Someone is trafficking her.
Do you think you're going to convince a jury that you don't have nothing to do with that?
I just felt like I gotta solve this case.
A lot of murderers are emotional when they take a life. Not him. He's cold as ice.
How much worse will it be if we don't get who did this?
And I'm like, what? What do you mean they've been murdered?
We're not just the police, we're the murder police. When Kane busted a Cap and Abel, did he send a uniform to take the report? No, he sent a f***ing detective.
In Wichita Falls, Texas, police had 4 unsolved murders, the worst crime spree in the small town's history. For more than a decade, the killer successfully eluded police. But a discarded coffee cup in a trash bin solved the mystery. On January 19, 1985, Tony Gibbs, a 23-year-old nurse, disappeared after working the night shift at Wichita General Hospital. Her car was found abandoned on a deserted road not far from the hospital. There were no foreign fingerprints or clues inside.
The roller coaster of emotions that you go through is just unbelievable. It's like a horrible dream that doesn't go away.
4 weeks later, a Texas electric worker found Tony's body in a deserted field outside of town along U.S. Route 281. 100 feet away was an old bus. Inside was blood which matched Tony Gibbs. It appeared she had been stabbed in the bus, then crawled out into the field looking for help.
Until this terrible thing happened, she had the world by the tail. She really did.
Almost immediately, police had a suspect. 24-year-old Danny Laughlin was seen riding his motorcycle in a field near where Tony's body was found. Laughlin worked in town as a male stripper. When asked to take a polygraph test, he failed. Investigators also learned that Laughlin knew Tony Gibbs. He had met her a few weeks earlier at a local nightclub.
And then he made some comments about knowing where the field was at, where she was found.
Semen collected at Tony's autopsy was compared to Laughlin's DNA. The results were inconclusive. Nevertheless, Danny Laughlin was charged with Tony Gibbs' murder. With no forensic evidence linking Laughlin to the crime, prosecutors presented their circumstantial case against him during the trial. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury was deadlocked.
He could not reach a verdict on guilt innocence, and so a mistrial was declared and it was subsequently dismissed.
Since only one of the 12 jurors believed Laughlin was guilty, prosecutors decided not to retry the case. 16 months later, there was another murder. This time, a 21-year-old waitress, Tina Kimbrough.
She was just everything a daughter's supposed to be. You know, a tomboy today and a debutante tonight, you know, just perfect.
Tina was found dead on the sofa in her apartment. At the autopsy, tiny fibers were discovered in her lungs, an indication she had been suffocated. Those fibers matched a pillow from her sofa. In this case, there were no signs of sexual assault. Neighbors in the apartment complex said they saw a man leaving Tina's apartment about 5 hours before her body was discovered. The man was described as Caucasian, 6 feet 2 inches tall, with dark hair, wearing a baseball cap. Danny Laughlin was not a suspect in this case since he didn't match the description. But a few days later, police got their first break. A man in Galveston, Texas, Farron Wardrip, called police to say he had some important information about Tina Kimbrough's murder. But what did Wardrip know about a murder that took place over 400 miles away? Shortly after Tina Kimbrough's murder, Farron Wardrip, 400 miles away in Galveston, Texas, called police with some information. Wardrip was a high school dropout who worked at menial jobs and had a history of drug and alcohol abuse. He claimed to have met Tina Kimbrough in a bar where she worked.
Tina Kimbrough really was my friend. That she knew I had a drug problem, and she knew I had a lot of other things because I, shared that with her.
Wardrip admitted he killed Tina. The reason? Tina reminded him of his ex-wife, who ended their marriage shortly before the murder.
When the rage and all the violence was occurring, I saw her eyes, I saw her face, I screamed how much I hated her.
Police believe that Wardrip confessed because he knew he was spotted leaving the apartment and feared it was only a matter of time before he was caught. In any event, Farron Wardrip pleaded guilty to Tina Kimbrough's murder and was sentenced to 35 years in prison.
When I was in prison and I got off drugs and alcohol and got some clear thinking going on and some of my emotions had subsided, that's when I started making the decisions that I was going to come out better than I went in.
While in prison, Wardrip obtained his high school diploma and discovered Christianity. Tina's father believed that Wardrip would spend all of 35 years in prison, but he was wrong.
In 13 months, they notify me that he's up for parole. And it just scared me to death. I mean, and in my mind, he was going to get out.
For 10 years, Robert Kimbrough used every means at his disposal to ensure that Farron Wardrip remained behind bars. But despite the wishes of Tina's family, Wardrip was released on parole after serving only 11 years of a 35-year sentence. Wardrip went to live in Olney, Texas, a small farming community just outside of Fort Worth. There, Wardrip had the support of his mother, father, and 8 siblings. He got a job at the Olney Door and Screen Company and vowed to start his life over.
Very nice man, a fine, upstanding man. I'd have trusted him with my kids. I still would. I still have that much respect for him.
Wardrip was an active member of the Hamilton Street Church of Christ, where he taught Sunday school. He also remarried. Back in Wichita Falls, District Attorney Barry Maka had other concerns. There were a number of unsolved murders in his jurisdiction. Still unsolved was the murder of Tony Gibbs, and there were 2 other unsolved murders. A year before Tony Gibbs' murder, another nurse, 21-year-old Terry Sims, had just returned home from work when someone knocked on her front door and forced his way inside.
She's trying to ward off the knife that he's wielding, and she is fighting so hard, so ferociously for her life that he cuts a cord and ties her hands behind her back.
Terry Sims was sexually assaulted, then stabbed to death. On Terry Sims' shoe was a bloody fingerprint, and a semen sample was preserved for future DNA testing. There had been a few suspects in the murder, but nothing definitive. And a year later, tragedy struck 21-year-old Ellen Blau as she walked to her car around midnight after leaving work at the Subs and Suds restaurant.
At that point, he just bull rushed her, hit her, knocked her, pushed her back into a car.
Ellen was forced to drive to a deserted field on the outskirts of town, where she was strangled. Her body was left on a grassy embankment. The assailant drove her car back to town and left it on a dark street. Ellen's body was found days later, so badly decomposed by the heat, she could be identified only through dental records. It was impossible to determine whether she had been raped. For 14 years, these 3 murders had gone unsolved. So Barry Maka asked his lead investigator, John Little, to take a fresh look at these cold cases. For Little, finding the killer was personal.
I knew Tony Gibbs. My wife knew Tony Gibbs. And I actually went out with my brother and helped search for her.
On a hunch, Maka asked the forensics lab to compare the DNA of the semen recovered from Tony Gibbs and Terry Sims.
We received word that they were, in fact, the semen from the same perpetrator. And so we knew then that we had a serial murderer.
No one made this connection because these 3 cases had been investigated by 3 different law enforcement agencies, with little communication between them. At least now, John Little knew he was looking for only one killer. But after 11 years, he knew it wouldn't be easy. When John Little looked through the case files of the 3 unsolved murders in Wichita Falls, Texas, he made an interesting discovery. When Farron Wardrip was in custody for Tina Kimbrough's murder, a policeman asked him if he knew Ellen Blau, who had been murdered just a few months earlier. Wardrip said yes. But that lead was never pursued.
They could have come up with a suspect, as me being a suspect, if they would have just, maybe paid him a little bit more attention.
And Little found more evidence linking Wardrip. Ellen Blau's best friend, Janie Ball, lived just down the hall from Wardrip, and the coincidences didn't stop there.
Miss Ball was a block down from where Terry Sims was killed on Bell Street. So, when I saw that in the file, and knowing there was 2 different agencies investigating this, and knowing that they probably didn't put it together, well, it really snapped together for me at that point.
Little also learned that Wardrip was a janitor at the same hospital as Tony Gibbs at the time of her murder.
That made a connection to her. He'd worked with her. Now she's another victim. But her car was abandoned in the same neighborhood where Wardrip lived.
So he decided to go to Olney, Texas, hoping to collect Wardrip's DNA, since police had semen from the murders. Wardrip had been living there since his release from prison in 1996. Little spent weeks staking out the factory where Wardrip worked, hoping to collect anything that would reveal his DNA profile.
If we were to get a sample from Mr. Wardrop, I wanted it to be a situation where he did, in fact, abandon any interest in the item so that there wouldn't be any search and seizure problems.
From across the street, Little watched as Wardrop took a coffee break after working a forklift.
They set the cup up on top of the car. I mean, at that point, I had to hold myself back from just running across the street and snatching it.
Little noticed that Wardrop threw his paper cup into a nearby trash barrel. Little seized the opportunity.
I walked up to him, and I did have a big wad of tobacco in my mouth, and I said, "Do you have a spit cup or something?" And he pointed over to the trash barrel, and he said, "Sure, help yourself."
Little looked into the barrel and saw not one used coffee cup, but many. Not knowing which one was Wardrop's cup, Little had to act fast.
It seemed like an eternity looking into it. He was standing right over my shoulder. There was still some coffee in the bottom of this cup, and it had cheese cracker crumbs on the drinking rim. And I'd seen him eating the cheese crackers, and I said, "This has got to be the cup."
The cup was immediately sent to the forensic lab for DNA testing. Manager Judy Floyd examined the cup for skin cells. She noticed the cracker crumbs were still on the cup and felt sure she could retrieve DNA.
I swabbed the cup with a sterile cotton swab in order to pick up epithelial cells, and then it was this swab that I actually used for the extraction of DNA.
Floyd then compared the DNA from the coffee cup to the DNA from the semen collected from two of the victims, Terry Sims and Tony Gibbs.
When I observed the complete profile that I had obtained from the cells from the cup that Mr. Wardrop had used, I could see that his profile was an exact match to the profiles from the crime scenes.
To find out how often this DNA profile would occur in the general population, Judy Floyd performed what is called a DQ alpha test, which is a particular location on chromosome number 6. Judy Floyd discovered Wardrop's DQ alpha type was extremely rare.
This particular typing was rare enough that combined with all of the other genetic types in his profile, that particular profile would be expected to occur only once in the world's population.
Meanwhile, the Austin, Texas crime lab was able to lift the bloody print on Terry Sims' shoe and compare it to Wardrop's fingerprints.
It was so far down on the third digit, almost into the palm, that unless you could really just sit there and work with it to get the print and know where it was at, you could take a set of prints and miss it every time.
But it was clearly Wardrop's print.
I think it was a powerful piece of evidence. He had ripped those shoes off of her and had blood on his hands when he grabbed her shoes to pull them off.
Farron Wardrop was arrested and during questioning revealed one last piece of information that police knew nothing about. After 15 long years, the families of Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, and Ellen Blau were within inches of justice when Farron Wardrop was arrested for their murders. And when he was confronted with the DNA evidence, he confessed.
I don't think I've ever sat in a room with somebody who could have been colder.
Wardrop didn't realize he was sitting next to the man who trapped him.
I asked him if he recognized me when I was from being down there getting the cup, and he claims he didn't.
As the interrogation was about to end, Wardrop confessed to a fifth murder.
I believe her name is Taylor.
2 months after Tony Gibbs' murder, Farron Wardrop told police he left Wichita Falls and went to Fort Worth, Texas. he met Deborah Taylor, a wife and mother of two, in a neighborhood bar. Deborah had been there with her husband, but he was tired and had left the bar a few hours earlier. Wardrip asked her to dance, then offered to drive her home. In the parking lot, when Deborah refused his advances, he killed her. Wardrip dumped Taylor's body at a remote construction site. Workers found it 1 week later. Deborah's husband, Ken, remained a suspect for 14 years, although he was never charged.
I think Mr. Wardrip should be very glad that these guys got him before I did.
The new DNA testing also had another benefit. It exonerated Danny Laughlin, who had been tried for Tony Gibbs' murder but not convicted. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to hear about it. He was killed 3 years earlier in an automobile accident. On October 4th, 1999, nearly 15 years after he committed these crimes, Farron Wardrip pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to death by lethal injection.
I never once thought I got away with it. I knew that I had left evidence behind. Detectives looked at all the evidence that was collected, all the interviews and stuff, and of course my name was there in 1986 just like it was in 1999. And why those individuals didn't recognize that is still confusing to me to this day. I really was a serial killer.
Mistakes were made, but the one that was not made was to quit or give up. We never did that.
In February of 2017, Abigail Williams and Liberty German are murdered near Delphi, Indiana. It's a tragedy that launches one of the most divisive crime stories of this century. I'm Dan Semitovich. On my new show, Deviant, I'm spending the next month telling the full story of Delphi as we know it. We'll pull together the evidence and ask the big questions. What happened in those woods that day? Was justice served? Join me as we try to make sense of all of it. Subscribe to Deviant now, wherever you get your podcasts.
In Wichita Falls, Texas, police had 4 unsolved murders, the worst crime spree in the small town's history. For more than a decade, the killer successfully eluded police, but a discarded coffee cup in a trash bin solved the mystery. On January 19, 1985, Tony Gibbs, a 23-year-old nurse, disappeared after working the night shift at Wichita General Hospital. Her car was found abandoned on a deserted road not far from the hospital. There were no foreign fingerprints or clues inside.
The roller coaster of emotions that you go through is just unbelievable. It's like a horrible dream that doesn't go away.
4 weeks later, a Texas electric worker found Tony's body in a deserted field outside of town along U.S. Route 281. 100 feet away was an old bus. Inside was blood which matched Tony Gibbs. It appeared she had been stabbed in the bus, then crawled out into the field looking for help.
Until this terrible thing happened, she had the world by the tail. She really did.
Almost immediately, police had a suspect. 24-year-old Danny Laughlin was seen riding his motorcycle in a field near where Tony's body was found. Laughlin worked in town as a male stripper. When asked to take a polygraph test, he failed. Investigators also learned that Laughlin knew Tony Gibbs. He had met her a few weeks earlier at a local nightclub.
And then he made some comments about knowing where the field was at, where she was found.
Semen collected at Tony's autopsy was compared to Laughlin's DNA. The results were inconclusive. Nevertheless, Danny Laughlin was charged with Tony Gibbs' murder. With no forensic evidence linking Laughlin to the crime, prosecutors presented their circumstantial case against him during the trial. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury was deadlocked.
He could not reach a verdict on guilt innocence, and so a mistrial was declared and it was subsequently dismissed.
Since only one of the 12 jurors believed Laughlin was guilty, prosecutors decided not to retry the case. 16 months later, there was another murder. This time, a 21-year-old waitress, Tina Kimbrough.
She was just everything a daughter's supposed to be. You know, a tomboy today and a debutante tonight, you know, just perfect.
Tina was found dead on the sofa in her apartment. At the autopsy, tiny fibers were discovered in her lungs, an indication she had been suffocated. Those fibers matched a pillow from her sofa. In this case, there were no signs of sexual assault. Neighbors in the apartment complex said they saw a man leaving Tina's apartment about 5 hours before her body was discovered. The man was described as Caucasian, 6 feet 2 inches tall, with dark hair, wearing a baseball cap. Danny Laughlin was not a suspect in this case since he didn't match the description. But a few days later, police got their first break. A man in Galveston, Texas, Farron Wardrip, called police to say he had some important information about Tina Kimbrough's murder. But what did Wardrip know about a murder that took place over 400 miles away? Shortly after Tina Kimbrough's murder, Farron Wardrip, 400 miles away in Galveston, Texas, called police with some information. Wardrip was a high school dropout who worked at menial jobs and had a history of drug and alcohol abuse. He claimed to have met Tina Kimbrough in a bar where she worked.
Tina Kimbrough really was my friend. She knew I had a drug problem, and she knew I had a lot of other things because I, shared that with her.
Wardrip admitted he killed Tina. The reason? Tina reminded him of his ex-wife, who ended their marriage shortly before the murder.
When the rage and all the violence was occurring, I saw her eyes, I saw her face, I screamed how much I hated her.
Police believe that Wardrip confessed because he knew he was spotted leaving the apartment and feared it was only a matter of time before he was caught. In any event, Farron Wardrip pleaded guilty to Tina Kimbrough's murder and was sentenced to 35 years in prison.
When I was in prison and I got off drugs and alcohol and got some clear thinking going on and some of my emotions had subsided, that's when I started making the decisions that I was going to come out better than I went in.
While in prison, Wardrip obtained his high school diploma and discovered Christianity. Tina's father believed that Wardrip would spend all of 35 years in prison, but he was wrong.
In 13 months, they notify me that he's up for parole. And it just scared me to death. I mean, and in my mind, he was going to get out.
For 10 years, Robert Kimbrough used every means at his disposal to ensure that Farron Wardrip remained behind bars. But despite the wishes of Tina's family, Wardrip was released on parole after serving only 11 years of a 35-year sentence. Wardrip went to live in Olney, Texas, a small farming community just outside of Fort Worth. There, Wardrip had the support of his mother, father, and 8 siblings, He got a job at the Olney Door and Screen Company and vowed to start his life over.
Very nice man, a fine, upstanding man. I'd have trusted him with my kids. I still would. I still have that much respect for him.
Wardrip was an active member of the Hamilton Street Church of Christ, where he taught Sunday school. He also remarried. Back in Wichita Falls, District Attorney Barry Maka had other concerns. There were a number of unsolved murders in his jurisdiction. Still unsolved was the murder of Tony Gibbs, and there were 2 other unsolved murders. A year before Tony Gibbs' murder, another nurse, 21-year-old Terry Sims, had just returned home from work when someone knocked on her front door and forced his way inside.
She's trying to ward off the knife that he's wielding, and she is fighting so hard, so ferociously for her life that he cuts a cord and ties her hands behind her back.
Terry Sims was sexually assaulted, then stabbed to death. On Terry Sims' shoe was a bloody fingerprint, and a semen sample was preserved for future DNA testing. There had been a few suspects in the murder, but nothing definitive. And a year later, tragedy struck 21-year-old Ellen Blau as she walked to her car around midnight after leaving work at the Subs and Suds restaurant.
At that point, he just bull rushed her, hit her, knocked her, pushed her back into a car.
Ellen was forced to drive to a deserted field on the outskirts of town, where she was strangled. Her body was left on a grassy embankment. The assailant drove her car back to town and left it on a dark street. Ellen's body was found days later, so badly decomposed by the heat, she could be identified only through dental records. It was impossible to determine whether she had been raped. For 14 years, these 3 murders had gone unsolved. So Barry Maka asked his lead investigator, John Little, to take a fresh look at these cold cases. For Little, finding the killer was personal.
I knew Tony Gibbs. My wife knew Tony Gibbs. And I actually went out with my brother and helped search for her.
On a hunch, Maka asked the forensics lab to compare the DNA of the semen recovered from Tony Gibbs and Terry Sims.
We received word that they were, in fact, the semen from the same perpetrator. And so we knew then that we had a serial murderer.
No one made this connection because these 3 cases had been investigated by 3 different law enforcement agencies, with little communication between them. At least now, John Little knew he was looking for only one killer. But after 11 years, he knew it wouldn't be easy. When John Little looked through the case files of the 3 unsolved murders in Wichita Falls, Texas, he made an interesting discovery. When Farron Wardrip was in custody for Tina Kimbrough's murder, a policeman asked him if he knew Ellen Blau, who had been murdered just a few months earlier. Wardrip said yes. But that lead was never pursued.
They could have come up with a suspect, as me being a suspect, if they would have just, maybe paid him a little bit more attention.
And Little found more evidence linking Wardrip. Ellen Blau's best friend, Janie Ball, lived just down the hall from Wardrip, and the coincidences didn't stop there.
Miss Ball was a block down from where Terry Sims was killed on Bell Street. So, when I saw that in the file and knowing there was 2 different agencies investigating this and knowing that they probably didn't put it together Well, it really snapped together for me at that point.
Little also learned that Wardrip was a janitor at the same hospital as Tony Gibbs at the time of her murder.
That made a connection to her. He'd worked with her. Now she's another victim. Her car was abandoned in the same neighborhood where Wardrip lived.
So he decided to go to Olney, Texas, hoping to collect Wardrip's DNA, since police had semen from the murders. Wardrip had been living there since his release from prison in 1996. Little spent weeks staking out the factory where Wardrip worked, hoping to collect anything that would reveal his DNA profile.
If we were to get a sample from Mr. Wardrip, I wanted it to be a situation where he did, in fact, abandon any interest in the item so that there wouldn't be any search and seizure problems.
From across the street, Little watched as Wardrip took a coffee break after working a forklift.
They set the cup up on top of the car. I mean, at that point, I had to hold myself back from just running across the street and snatching it.
Little noticed that Wardrip threw his paper cup into a nearby trash barrel. Little seized the opportunity.
I walked up to him, and I did have a big wad of tobacco in my mouth, and I said, "Do you have a spit cup or something?" And he pointed over to the trash barrel, and he said, "Sure, help yourself."
Little looked into the barrel and saw not one used coffee cup, but many. Not knowing which one was Wardrip's cup, Little had to act fast.
It seemed like an eternity looking into it. He was standing right over my shoulder. There was still some coffee in the bottom of this cup, and it had cheese cracker crumbs on the drinking rim. And I'd seen him eating the cheese crackers, and I said, "This has got to be the cup."
The cup was immediately sent to the forensic lab for DNA testing. Manager Judy Floyd examined the cup for skin cells. She noticed the cracker crumbs were still on the cup and felt sure she could retrieve DNA.
I swabbed the cup with a sterile cotton swab in order to pick up epithelial cells, and then it was this swab that I actually used for the extraction of DNA.
Floyd then compared the DNA from the coffee cup to the DNA from the semen collected from two of the victims, Terry Sims and Tony Gibbs.
When I observed the complete profile that I had obtained from the cells from the cup that Mr. Wardrip had used, I could see that his profile was an exact match to the profiles from the crime scenes.
To find out how often this DNA profile would occur in the general population, Judy Floyd performed what is called a DQ alpha test, which is a particular location on chromosome number 6. Judy Floyd discovered Wardrip's DQ alpha type was extremely rare.
This particular typing was rare enough that combined with all of the other genetic types in his profile, that particular profile would be expected to occur only once in the world's population.
Meanwhile, the Austin, Texas crime lab was able to lift the bloody print on Terry Sims' shoe and compare it to Wardrip's fingerprints.
It was so far down on the third digit, almost into the palm, that unless you could really just sit there and work with it to get the print and know where it was at, you could take a set of prints and miss it every time.
But it was clearly Wardrip's print.
I think it was a powerful piece of evidence. He had ripped those shoes off of her and had blood on his hands when he grabbed her shoes to pull them off.
Farron Wardrip was arrested and during questioning revealed one last piece of information that police knew nothing about. After 15 long years, the families of Terry Sims, Tony Gibbs, and Ellen Blau were within inches of justice when Farron Wardrip was arrested for their murders. And when he was confronted with the DNA evidence, he confessed.
I don't think I've ever sat in a room with somebody who could have been colder.
Wardrip didn't realize he was sitting next to the man who trapped him.
I asked him if he recognized me when I was from being down there getting the cup, and he claims he didn't.
As the interrogation was about to end, Wardrip confessed to a fifth murder.
I believe her name is Clement.
2 months after Tony Gibbs' murder, Farron Wardrip told police he left Wichita Falls and went to Fort Worth, Texas. He met Deborah Taylor, a wife and mother of two, in a neighborhood bar. Deborah had been there with her husband, but he was tired and had left the bar a few hours earlier. Wardrip asked her to dance, then offered to drive her home. In the parking lot, when Deborah refused his advances, he killed her. Wardrip dumped Taylor's body at a remote construction site. Workers found it 1 week later. Deborah's husband, Ken, remained a suspect for 14 years, although he was never charged.
I think Mr. Wardrip should be very glad that these guys got him before I did.
The new DNA testing also had another benefit. It exonerated Danny Laughlin, who had been tried for Tony Gibbs' murder but not convicted. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to hear about it. He was killed 3 years earlier in an automobile accident. On October 4th, 1999, nearly 15 years after he committed these crimes, Farron Wardrip pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to death by lethal injection.
I never once thought I got away with it. I knew that I had left evidence behind. Detectives looked at all the evidence that was collected, all the interviews and stuff, and of course my name was there in 1986 just like it was in 1999. And why those individuals didn't recognize that is still confusing to me to this day. I really was a serial killer.
Mistakes were made, but the one that was not made was to quit or give up. We never did that.
In February of 2017, Abigail Williams and Liberty German are murdered near Delphi, Indiana. It's a tragedy that launches one of the most divisive crime stories of this century. I'm Dan Semitovich. On my new show, Deviant, I'm spending the next month telling the full story of Delphi as we know it. We'll pull together the evidence and ask the big questions. What happened in those woods that day? Was justice served? Join me as we try to make sense of all of it. Subscribe to Deviant now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Up next, a nursing student disappears.
It's really a mystery as to where she's vanished.
And her ex-boyfriend is the prime suspect.
I'm telling the police, I'd really like for you to take a look at him.
But without a body, is there even a case?
You don't have a crime yet. What's the crime?
The only real clue is a set of keys. The trick for investigators is finding out which door they might open.
The keys are a mystery at this point.
Ever since she was a little girl, Tamika Houston wanted to be a professional singer, and many thought she had the talent to make it.
She tried out for American Idol, and she was devastated when she didn't make the first cut.
Realizing how difficult it was to make it in the entertainment business, at the age of 24, Tamika decided to enter nursing school. When classes ended and summertime came, Tamika finally had some free time.
She didn't have class to report to. She didn't have a job to go to every morning. She was very spontaneous. She was the type of person to get in her car and kind of go.
And that's what everyone thought had happened when they couldn't get in touch with her. But after 2 weeks passed, her family became alarmed.
I called police and said that there's clearly something wrong. I can't locate my niece. She's not returning anyone's phone calls.
Tamika was 24 years old, and it's perfectly acceptable for someone who doesn't want to call someone to not call them.
Police in Spartanburg, South Carolina, went to Tamika's house. Her car was gone, and the doors were locked, but they gained access through an open window. In the back room, police found Tamika's dog and a litter of puppies, all on the verge of starvation.
I remember the detective coming and telling me that she loved animals and she would not have left her animals.
There were no signs of violence and no indication where she'd gone. Police issued a Be on the Lookout bulletin for Tamika's car, a 1991 black Honda.
Could have been a traffic accident off the side of a road, and which would still be a tragedy, but it would be a criminal tragedy.
Family and friends put up missing person flyers all over town.
As a mother, it's very difficult not knowing where my daughter is or hoping that and thinking that she's okay and safe.
Police checked Tamika's cell phone and credit card records, and there had been no activity during the time she'd been missing. Tamika's ex-boyfriend, Terrence Moss, went to police and offered his assistance. He had been living with Tamika until 3 months earlier when they broke up.
There was an incident at her house where she accused him of hitting her and striking her.
However many flares can go off in a law enforcement officer's mind, that's how many would have gone off with Terrence Moss.
Moss said he knew nothing about Tamika's disappearance, although he admitted the assault, claiming it was a one-time incident.
I punched her. I actually punched her. And I fell down on my knees and I started praying. And I was like, it's just so many demons in here that, we're becoming physical with each other now that we just need to separate.
Because of that incident, Tamika had filed an assault charge against Moss, and she disappeared just 2 weeks before she was to appear in court.
As we kept pressuring and pushing and repeating questions to him, he became agitated and finally just shut down from us and refused to talk to us completely.
Terrence Moss is prime suspect number one.
One month had passed since Tamika Houston disappeared, and police were no closer to finding her.
She could still be alive. We don't know. There was still kind of like an undercurrent of a sense of hope.
Then, a tenant in a nearby apartment complex called police with a tip.
Flyers were distributed all over Spartanburg. Tamika Houston's face became very familiar to people in this area. A woman saw the flyer and saw the description picture of the car on there and said, this looks like a car that's parked behind Barksdale Apartments.
And she was correct. It was Tamika's car, parked just 4 miles from Tamika's home. No one living in the apartment saw anyone driving the car or parking it. Inside, police found no forensic evidence, no blood, and no sign of a struggle. The only clue was a partial fingerprint, which didn't match Tamika's ex-boyfriend Terrence Moss or anyone in the National Fingerprint Database.
The car wasn't the treasure trove I'm sure police had hoped for.
But investigators did find a set of keys on the passenger's side floor.
You could see that one looked like an automobile key and one looked like a house key.
None of the keys worked in Tamika's car.
So we thought maybe those were the keys to Tamika's house.
But they didn't work there either.
The keys don't belong to Tamika Houston, so maybe they belong to the person responsible for her disappearance.
The keys were dusted for fingerprints, but none were found. Then investigators noticed a code on one of the keys.
It had a special stamp on it. It was stamped with AA14. Nothing that indicates who cut the key, who put the stamp on it. It was just a key with a stamp.
Investigators took the key to all the locksmiths in the area. Miraculously, one of them was able to identify it.
He said, I can tell you who I made it for. So he pulls his records out, and after looking through his records for a while, he finds who that code was, and that was for Fremont School Apartments.
Fremont School Apartments was once a local elementary school, and the government converted it into some public housing.
Detectives tried the key in each of the 46 apartments. Strangely, it didn't open any of them, but it did open a storage area door.
It fit a door in the basement, and the door that it fit in the basement, when it opened up, that was an apartment that was closed. It had been taken offline because of flood issues.
Investigators asked forensic technicians to look for possible evidence inside that room.
We ended up seizing all the evidence out of that offline apartment, and it was a tremendous amount, and we processed it for any kind of DNA or anything for Tamika, and it ended up being a dead end also.
No one in the apartment complex had seen a woman matching Tamika's description.
There was a lot, I think, false hope during that time.
Then the apartment manager offered a possible explanation. When a tenant is evicted, maintenance often removes the entire doorknob from the evicted tenant's apartment door and replaces it with a doorknob from another apartment,
so that the person who moved out can't come back later with a copied key and enter that apartment again.
Unfortunately, they didn't keep good records of which doorknobs were swapped, meaning the doorknob from the basement unit could have come from any apartment in the complex. Investigators were convinced that the apartment key found in Tamika Houston's car held the secret to her disappearance. But it didn't open any of the apartment doors in the Fremont School Apartments, only a basement storage area. So investigators asked for a list of tenants, including those who'd been evicted. And they showed that list to Tamika's friends and relatives.
You get to a point where you've run out of more traditional leads, so you're going to pursue it even if it's a somewhat unusual lead.
Her best friend mentioned there's this guy named Chris that she started seeing around the time of her disappearance.
There was only one person named Chris on the tenant list, Christopher Hampton. He'd been evicted from the Fremont Apartments 1 month after Tamika disappeared. He also had a police record. He served 4 years in prison for bank robbery. Investigators located Chris Hampton. He was in prison, serving a 30-day sentence for a parole violation, but records showed he was free at the time of Tamika's disappearance. When questioned, Hampton said he knew Tamika, but he didn't know where she was.
She said, I want to go to the bank with you.
She said who she was going with?
No, she didn't say. She said she was going.
Did you see her at any point after that?
Nah, the last time I seen her.
Hampton's prints did not match the partial print found in Tamika's car. But investigators got a huge break when Hampton's former girlfriend, the mother of his 2 young children, called police. She said Hampton mailed her his wallet for safekeeping since he wasn't permitted to keep it in prison.
She says, I've got his wallet if y'all want to come look at it.
She told police she called because she'd been following news stories about Tamika Houston's disappearance and was well aware that Hampton had been living in the Fremont Apartments. She also said there was a tiny speck of blood on the wallet.
If it wasn't for that media coverage there, that young lady may have never came forward.
I examined the photograph, found the speck of potential blood, took it through the preliminary testing for blood, and it passed.
But whose blood was it? To find out, investigators needed DNA from Tamika's family.
In this case, we had the mother and the father, so you can quickly ascertain whether or not this unknown sample could have originated from an offspring from those 2 parents.
The DNA test left no doubt. The blood was Tamika's. When confronted with this evidence, Hampton again denied any involvement.
Whatever happened to Tamika happened right there in your apartment.
I don't believe that. How you know her blood? It could be anybody's blood.
No, it can't be anybody's blood. How long you think we've been doing this? You don't know that we can tell one person's blood from another blood? You ever heard of DNA?
Yeah.
But prosecuting a case without a body is never easy.
Her body is not turned up. You've got pets abused, no contact with your family, and an injury that led to a loss of blood. And your car has been abandoned. That's pretty good circumstantial evidence that something bad happened to you. But you still got murder, manslaughter, involuntary, self-defense, accident. What do you have to fill in any of those 5 scenarios right now?
"14 months after Tamika Houston's disappearance, her ex-boyfriend, Terrence Moss, was no longer considered a suspect. That's because police found Tamika's blood in a wallet belonging to Chris Hampton, a man who Tamika had been dating at the time of her disappearance. Hampton once lived in apartment 215 of the Fremont School Apartments, but more than a year had passed, and another family was now living there. Then, a young woman called police to say she was inside apartment 215 with Chris Hampton around the time of Tamika's disappearance. And she'd seen something suspicious.
There was a large brownish-red stain on the floor in the bedroom, and that the dresser was pulled over in front of the closet door, which was odd.
Investigators obtained a search warrant and found evidence of a cleanup in the master bedroom, just as she described.
Whenever law enforcement sees bleach, they think clean up crime scene, clean up blood, so you start peeling away the carpet.
And when we pulled the carpet up, there was a large reddish-brown stain that was on the back of the carpet and into the padding on the floor.
This stain tested positive for human blood, and they found more blood elsewhere in the apartment.
Not only was there blood in the bedroom, there was blood in the closet, which was in some instances even more interesting. How would a blood stain get inside a closet?
Analysts sprayed luminol in every room of the apartment and found even more blood.
You just know that this is where something really bad and really violent happened. You immediately know that she was moved from here and taken into the closet and laid in the closet, because the one in the closet's the perfect size of a head.
DNA testing confirmed the blood was Tamika's.
It just took all the life out of me, because I knew that, hey, my daughter was in an apartment and there was enough blood that my daughter could have died.
The blood evidence and information provided by the young woman gave investigators a picture of what happened.
He sticks her in a closet and goes and gets a girl and has sex with her and enjoys a meal, and then has to figure out, how am I going to get this body out of my apartment?
When investigators confronted Chris Hampton, he initially had nothing to say. But he must have realized the weight of the evidence against him, because he made police an offer.
He stands up and he says, "Let's go." We said, "Where are we going? Are we going to the jail? Or are you going to show us where she's at?" He says, "I'll show you where she's at."
Hampton led investigators to a wooded area about 12 miles away and pointed to the exact spot where he buried Tamika's body. He said he was sure because he left a marker.
He just said that he made a cross out of sticks that he found laying around on the ground and just laid them out on the ground in a cross pattern.
In a shallow grave, investigators found a woman's remains. Dental records confirmed it was Tamika Houston.
It was really a difficult time for our entire family, and to see my sister suffer so much. You never really recover fully from losing someone in that way.
It's like somebody taking a pitchfork that's burning and sticking it to your chest, the side your heart is on. There's no other way to describe this pain.
Hampton told police that Tamika stopped by his apartment while he was ironing his clothes.
I got plans. I'm going out.
Plans with who?
They got into an argument. Hampton said it was because he was seeing other women.
I heard all about it.
Hampton admitted he lost his temper and struck her in the head with his iron. A tiny drop of blood landed on the inside of his wallet. Blood also dripped onto the carpet. The evidence shows Hampton wrapped Tamika's body in the bed sheets and put it in the closet. Then he pulled his chest of drawers in front of the closet door. Hampton brought another woman back to his apartment, who saw the blood stain on the floor. The next day, Hampton used a friend's car to transport Tamika's body to the wooded area where he buried her in a shallow grave. Hampton rented a carpet cleaner and removed as much blood as he could, although he couldn't remove everything. Large amounts of DNA remained. Later, when he abandoned Tamika's car in a nearby apartment complex, he inadvertently dropped his own keys on the passenger side floor. A set of keys with a locksmith stamp that led straight to his front door.
If we had not found out where that key went, we would probably still be looking for Tamika.
I imagine that the police officer wanted to probably kiss this locksmith, if not do more than that, when he said that, yeah, I recognize this key.
At first, Hampton claimed it was an accident.
I'm not telling you that he premeditated it. I'm telling you that he struck a blow with malice that resulted in her death. And if you doubt for 1 second whether or not that's true, look at what he did after it happened.
Chris Hampton changed his mind on the first day of his trial.
Are you guilty of the crime of murder?
Yes, sir. Christopher Hampton pled guilty the morning we were set to draw the jury, and I was surprised that he pled guilty.
As a result, Hampton was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
He came as close to getting away with it as AA-14 stamped on a key. He came close to it. The morals of the story are you don't know what the most important piece of evidence is going to be until after the trial's over. In this case, it happened to be a key which led you to a crime scene.